La Chinoise is one of my favourite films from Jean-Luc Godard. If we were listing his best films, I would place this on a very short list, along with Contempt, Alphaville, Pierrot, La Fou, Weekend, Tout va bien, Numero 2, Nouveau Vague, and probably a handful of his 21st century films. But let's just stick to his 20th century, just for the sake of simplifying this discussion. I think it is one of the most compelling films he made, lucidly distilling the zeitgeist, flourishing with filmic assertiveness, examining one of the most distinct, convicted political moments in modern times. Actually, few films are trying to funnel human history down into the present moment as La Chinoise has. This undertaking is arguably one of the most explicit goals of a Marxist analysis of any sort. A section of this film's themes on Wikipedia has this to say: thematically, La Chinoise concerns the 1960s new left political interest in such historical and ongoing events as the legacy of Lenin's October 1917 Russian Revolution, the escalating US military activities in the increasingly unstable region of Southeast Asia, and especially the Cultural Revolution brought about by the Red Guards under Mao Zedong in the People's Republic of China. The film also touches upon the rise of anti-humanist post-structuralism in French intellectual life by the mid-1960s, particularly the anti-empiricist ideas of the French Marxist Louis Althusser. Godard likewise portrays the role that certain objects in organizations, such as Mao's Little Red Book, the French Communist Party, and other small leftist factions, play in the developing ideology and activities of the Aden Arabi cell. These objects and organizations appear to become repurposed as entertainment products and fashion statements within a modern consumer capitalist society, the very society which the student radicals hope to transform through their revolutionary project. This paradox is illustrated in the various joke sunglasses that Guillaume wears, with the national flags of the US, USSR, China, France, and Britain each filling the frames, while reading Mao's Little Red Book, as well as the sight gag of having dozens of copies of the Little Red Book piled in mounds on the floor to literally create a defensive parapet against the forces of capitalist imperialism, and a jaunty satirical pop song, Mao Mao, sung by Cloud Chan, as heard on the soundtrack. Godard suggests that the students are, at the same moment, both serious, committed revolutionaries intent on bringing about major social change, and confused bourgeois youth flirting with the notion of radical politics as a fashionable and exciting distraction. Compare it to a film of that same year, Playtime, by Jacques Tati. This is Bruckner, read out by AOD now. Compare it to a film of that same year, Playtime by Jacques Tati, an old gentleman's alienation from the current moment, and then also in La Chinoise, the jaded, bored, contemptuous younger generation. Also compare it again with Godard's other film of that same year, Weekend, for the 30 to 40-year-old bracket of France, or the experience of the black immigrant to France as distilled in Med Hondo's remarkable film Soleil O. It is unclear who Rome are represented in The Collector, possibly the bourgeoisie, although the film's lack of budget and freedom from financiers does lend it to a certain liberatory aura I've always felt. The daydreamers of that year in France stayed indoors and imagined themselves as starring in Melville's Le Samurai, I would assume. Godard also put up 2 or 3 things I know about her that year to insist on the benign potentiality of the male gaze. I would argue successfully, but I don't know how a certain sensitive wing of contemporary discourse would be feeling about it. Elsewhere around the world, Britain seemed to best examine its psyche via visceral horror, Quatermass and the Pit, The Mummy's Shroud and Torture Garden, its own new wave faltering as it focused on the swinging London dimension as opposed to the kitchen sink auteurism. Performance from Rogue and Camel is an exception. That doesn't belong to any cinematic movement. That would be a grave disservice to its wild originality. America's film industry was dominated by the producers of Hollywood, and an independent producer's idea of counterculture was still theme park triviality by comparison to the films of France, say. Think of Corman's The Trip. Hollywood's output ranged from ruthless violence in war features like Aldrich's The Dirty Dozen to delightful family-friendly voyages such as Disney's feature The Jungle Book, or stranger, occasionally European-influenced violent exercises such as UK-born John Borman's Point Blank. It was in the non-narrative directors where America distilled a more radical cinematic pathos that year, we could potentially argue, though one exemplified by works such as Michael Snow's Wavelength that some of the French more radical directors would have dismissed as a bourgeois triviality. Further south, Brazil's Glauber Rocha composed Entranced Earth as an appeal to the adventurers attempting to animate the globe via their European cinema. Eastern Europe's priorities under Soviet occupation were markedly different, but no less radical, no less cinematic, no less original and transformative. Vlassel's Marketa Lazarova or Jan Schmidt's End of August at the Hotel Ozone seem to tap into primeval layers of the human pathos which must be examined before an attempt at consequential revolution, and might consider the priorities of, say, a Western European director like Buñuel for Belle de Joie to be trivial by comparison. In the East itself, the location mythologized by La Chinoise, or at least its infused players, it was not in Cultural Revolution's stunted China where the captivating cinema was emerging, but Japan, where the old masters like Mikio Neruse closing their career with devastating dramatic studies, as in that year's Two in the Shadow, aka Scattered Clouds, or a newer, younger director, Seijun Suzuki's shamelessly style over substance crime adventures, best represented in that year's and rapturously memorable Branded to Kill. South Korea's industry was emerging as something special, certainly. Take the wonderful somber drama The Guest Who Came In on the Last Train, directed by Yoo Hyun-mok. It was France that most wanted to experience a perceived modernity at that time, and it shows in her cinematic output in that era. We can take the subjective memories of those who lived through it with a little grain of salt, although judging by these films and the energy that emanates from them, I do feel as though there must have been something to this era. If experiencing its artifacts is so thrilling and enriching in retrospect, it may very well have been an animating joy and empowering rush to live through the years in which these films were created and released, discussed as contemporary statements that may well not just be the blind nostalgia of aging men. It may have had some basis in what was at least a psychological truth, an assumption that forthcoming events were optimistically inevitable, and that based on circumstances at the time, these seemed like logical deductions, even though the way the events panned out made their desired change seem less and less possible as another decade rolled by, outlined to some fairly extensive degree in Marcus' 77 epic documentary titled Grin Without a Cat. La Chinoise is a favourite due to its filmic compositional attributes, the insightful behaviours and dialogues of its players, the potential it shares in the lost future, which it supposed to be a preview for, and for its bizarre watchability for a film about characters focused upon the technical details of Marxist revolutionary strategy and theorizing. If there are any cons, it is that I can't imagine the film appealing to everyone. I'm imagining showing this to someone and then maybe not getting it due to the political character of the film and them being unfamiliar with those socialist discourses perhaps, it being too much dialogue for them and not enough plot or tension, them finding the ideals obtuse or the characters a bit unlikable, or not understanding what the point is in general. The first three are ultimately subjective upon the individual, not knowing context, not enjoying certain strains of narrative cinema, not caring for a certain wing of political thinkers. For the last objection, I will insist on the film's point being the pathos of those from this era, how they seem to embrace an idea of modernity, more so than the consumers of cutting-edge products, who seem to be more in favour of traditionalism, building up a so-called nuclear family, than embracing a fresh paradigm-shifting modernity, how the aestheticization of modernity is less a matter of spectacle and more a matter of framing, focusing, arranging, reprioritizing the vector of the images displayed for the audiences, and how ideas and the residue of a film beyond the conclusion of the runtime spills out of the screen and affects the viewers henceforth. A power that a film has beyond escapism, or rather truer escapism, a film which champions an escape from reality outside the screen, a rescue from reality, which the memory of the film serves as an engine for. The film, a new growth of thinking in the brain, as many important philosophical or political texts have been. It affects our view of reality henceforth as a homogenized, organized arrangement of elements of reality focused in between four corners, so that we might examine a distillation and come away with a refined vision of our surroundings, an enriched perception, and the film itself is beguilingly consciousness-raising, as certain literature has been, certain scientific studies have been, visual displays have been, or major cultural or historical events have been. One of the most exciting films ever made. I'll stand by that as much as others will find that statement totally perplexing and unbelievable. I wish you could wake up one day with my perspective, because that actually means you might be more willing to build a better world for everyone and not just a materially prosperous micro world solely for yourself.